And yet, here she was, wrapped in his arms like there was nowhere else in the world she wanted to be. Amanda cleared her throat and stepped back, wiping at her eyes. "What are you doing here anyway? I don't think there are any more flights arriving in." Scott laughed and gave her a wink. Her heart had that sinking feeling, the one she'd experienced constantly as a child when she'd known she'd been fooled, more often than not, by him. "I'm here for you," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Amanda laughed, loudly, and then she glowered at him when she realized that the smug look on his face meant he was serious. "You're kidding, right?" He had to be kidding. "Afraid not," he said, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Madison is still with your mom, finalizing the funeral arrangements, and Charlotte is stuck at the ranch." "So you're proposing to do what exactly with my things?" She had 2 suitcases and a bag, and from the look of his motorcycle, there wasn't even room for her purse. Not to mention the fact that she'd never ridden a death trap before in her life and wasn't intending on changing that fact anytime soon. "Maddie's going to pick up your things as soon as they're done. I'm going to get a locker for you, and then I can either take you home or to meet with them at the funeral home." Screw this. Could you not have at least brought your truck? Scott flashed her his way too handsome smile again. "And what kind of fun would that have been?" She took a deep breath. "You do realize that my dad's just died, right? I'm not in the mood for playing games." So much for him being genuinely concerned about her. Scott reached for her, ran his fingers down her bare arm and stared into her eyes. "That's exactly why I'm going to take you for a ride," he said, voice low. "When you're on the back of a Harley, you can forget everything. It's only for a little while, but it sure as hell helps with the pain. Trust me, I know." Amanda swallowed, hard. "I don't want to forget him," she whispered. "But you want to forget the pain, right?" When she nodded, he unzipped his leather jacket and slung it around her shoulders, before reaching for her bags and lugging them back into the terminal. Amanda watched him go before turning around to eye his beast of a motorcycle. She shrugged her way into his jacket, knowing how ridiculous she must look, but deciding that she didn't care. If Scott thought this would help her pain, then she wasn't going to say no, because the fact she hadn't made it home to see her dad before he died would haunt her forever. And even a moment's reprieve from that sounded like exactly what she needed, even if she was going to be pressed against the back of a man she'd sworn never to waste time thinking about or crying over ever again. Scott gripped the handlebars of his Harley and leaned into the bend, trying to remember all the reasons why his childhood best friend had warned him off Amanda. He hadn't seen Blake in a long while, but he was guessing he'd still receive a black eye if he so much as looked at his sister the wrong way. His brother had managed to marry Madison, but little sister Amanda had always been strictly forbidden, which was precisely why Scott had always found her so damn hard to stay away from. He tried to ignore the hands wrapped tight around his waist, or the fact that her body was shoved hard up against his. This Amanda was nothing like the sweet, pretty girl who'd made his teenage self desperate to get her in his bed. Grown-up Amanda was sophisticated, polished, and damn fine to look at. Her hair was long, at least halfway down her back, and it was blonder than it had been back then. She was taller now, though still a good few inches shorter than him, and she'd filled out in all the kind of places he appreciated. He accelerated as they hit a straight stretch of highway and grinned as she held on to him tighter. If he had it his way, he'd have driven all day with her hanging on like that. Scott reluctantly slowed when they turned onto the street where the funeral home was located, stopping just outside. He propped the motorcycle with his foot before pushing down the stand and waiting for Amanda to step off. When she didn't move, or even let go of his waist, he turned around to see what the problem was. "You change your mind about wanting..."